welcome again. This is great, actually. People have sent their apologies, I think, with the summer months as well. People are on holiday and vacationing. But what's great, you have to excuse me, we're sharing the screen. But welcome to this session again. I love the fact that you're here as well, because really this is for you. This is, again, a time of connecting to this particular session, which is marketing. And sometimes marketing's got a bit of a bad rap when it comes to the Christian realm, but actually marketing, if you want to reframe it and reword it, is a mechanism for relationship building and effective communication that actually connects to the people, the target audience that we're wanting to connect and bring along and lead into. And so actually it's a very effective tool and something that we love, and John and I love this whole subject area. And we're redeeming that name, really. I still love the name marketing, regardless, because I have a healthy view on what it actually entails. I love relationship building. I'm sure all of you do too, and especially as communicators. It's just looking at the best ways to understand your target audience and the best ways to communicate the message that you want to communicate. It's been really good. I've been looking as well at all the different styles of communicating with the different churches. So it's been great to see that. Feel free to ask questions, with it being a smaller group. This is great question and answering as well, to help you in the area that you're actually putting communication to. And John has got excellent expertise here, a wealth of knowledge, a wealth of experience that he applies here in Toronto. And also in his role with World, he's communicating and marketing to the different audiences. So this is great. This is going to be a one-on-one, 101 kind of touch base, ask questions, find out what you need, and really utilize his skill in terms of how that applies to you in the area that you serve, or the area that you're leading in. Because each one of us will at some point need to market. We're marketing ourselves, even if we're promoting who we are as individuals. Is that Aaron? Hey, Aaron.
Hey, how are you?
Oh, good to see you.
Good to see you too.
Oh, it's great. So actually, this is a great little starting point for you to feel inspired and feel equipped. There's something that you'll definitely, with John, the way he coaches, the way he imparts things, you'll have nuggets for you to take away and be able to apply. And actually, each one of us markets something. And actually, journey of what product do you have and how best to communicate that in order to reach your audience, and then bring into an action. Both John and I love bringing things into action and understanding that actually it has a purpose, it has a reason why for what you're doing. And what's really good is looking at the practicality of the how-to. It's great having vision, it's great having a product, but if you don't have a how-to and you don't have a mechanism to actually deliver that, then that's all you have, is a great product. And so really it's allowing your product to connect to the audience, and that's the marketing aspect that we all love. And we'd love to impart something of anything over to you. And feel free as well, during this, for those that have just joined us, this is a question and answer. Feel free to ask the questions that you need in your particular area. John's great also in that interaction, and I'll hand over to John because he'll be able to follow through on that. Any questions to begin with? Anything specific that you'd like answering? Feel free to text chat, because that'll also be great. As and when you listen to John, feel free to text chat questions, because as well, we can answer that as we go along, or bring that into an answer later on when I email you, or things like that if we don't have time. Okay, is that good? Great. There you go. Over to John.
My turn. So I just have a bunch of slides because that's how I like to roll. Let's do this. Can everybody see my slides? Give me a thumbs up. Yes?
Yep.
Beautiful. Okay. So I'm going to just skim through these. The other thing I'll say is marketing is very unique. And so what might work here in Toronto might be the opposite of working in Australia, might never work ever in Europe and all that kind of stuff. So what I've tried to do with this is it's very principle based to get your brain working. And then I've got my email at the end, and I'm very happy to meet independently with people and teams just to kind of help with specific areas due to their, you know, customers and demographics and all that. So feel free also to reach out and we can schedule some more individual time for some tips and tricks. But we'll start. So this is marketing. It's how to tell people all the cool stuff you're doing. And first and foremost, marketing often has the bad word or just selling, but for me, marketing is also communication, and they're the same. And so whether or not you're putting an ad in a newspaper or you're just, you know, speaking really clearly from the stage on a Sunday morning, it's both marketing. And so we need to not separate the two. And if you think about it as a whole, it really helps guide all of the communications, all of the team and the creativity and the graphics and all that. Another big thing we have to worry about and be aware of is that everything communicates, whether we like it or not. And so my example with this is when there's that grumpy greeter at church on Sunday morning that's just having a bad day. If they're grumpy and they're the first person that everyone walks into church and sees and interacts with, what that is, even though it's not intentional, is that people aren't feeling welcome. And we're marketing like sadness, basically. So it's really important to be aware that everything's communicating and everything is marketing a message to the people. Some different ways. The business word is touch points, but you can just ignore all that. By the way, this should save you all 3 years in school because this is better. So websites, emails, our bulletins, posters, signage, all that kind of stuff is really key to make sure that it's all on the same page. Your environment, how welcoming it is, the color on the walls, people's experience with volunteers and team, and even as you try to find a parking spot, that is marketing. Your staff, your volunteers, all of that is really key to kind of keep aware. The tone that you say things, implied content. So if, I know a lot of us like to do this where if there's certain political parties that certain speakers are handy, they can't actually say support this party, but they can imply content by, you know, getting close to it. And so it's important to be aware of what you're implying, even if it's not intentionalized. And then another big thing is where there's obvious omissions. And so if you're very obviously not communicating something or staying away from a certain topic, just the fact that you're not addressing that topic is also communicating something to somebody else. So it's really important just that you are intentional with every single thing you do, whether it's a church or whether you're selling sneakers. That's really important. We always come back to the brand, and it's not who we say we are, but who they say we are. So we're marketing and comms is always customer driven. So it's, if you ask the person that comes to church who you are and they give you an answer, that's actually who you are. You could say, you know, I could say I'm the strongest and most handsome male in the whole world. But if nobody else thinks that, then that's not me, right? So it's really important to be aware of that, and being clear, consistent, and concise enables us to help us shape that. But if people aren't seeing us for who we'd like them to see us, it's important that basically we either need to be better at our jobs in communicating, or we need to shift what we think we are. So, you know, authenticity is key in all this, but really it's just a kind of a self-filter. Are we communicating well enough that people get who we want them to get or understand? So that's also very key. Marketing 101. This is the course that I paid way too much money for. So communication helps us understand one another. The better we communicate, the better we understand. If you understand me and get me, it's easier for me to sell you something because I'm going to sell you something that you want, if that makes sense. If our church members and the people in our cities get us, get who we are, get what we do, why we do it, then we're going to come up with things naturally that are going to be what they want to get. So it just makes it really easy if we're good communicators to sell things, and then being consistent with how we communicate builds that trust level with people. So consistency is really key in that we're not changing our minds week to week or day to day, and one Facebook post says this thing, and then on Sunday somebody gets up and says the opposite, because that just starts bringing into mistrust. But basically, if you trust me and you like respect me, well, now I have more influence over your purchases. So just like if you have a friend that recommends a movie, so there was the new Avengers movie that came out however many months ago. If you had a friend that was like, this is the greatest movie of all, because you trust that friend, they have influence to say you should go see it, right? Whereas if the same friend was like, that's the worst movie, you're probably still going to go see the Avengers, but you're going to come in with doubts, right? So when you have that trust and that relationship with people, that's going to help you to have more influence. And then the outcome of that influence is you can suggest coming to church, going to an event, buying a product, joining a missions trip, you know, and whatever the things are. So consistent communication is really key to building that trust, and trust is what the deal breaker is. I joke that I can probably sell most things to most people, and it's not because I'm a good salesman, but I'm good at building trust. And if I'm going to sell it to you, it's because I believe in it. And so that's going to be, if we can kind of echo that in all of our marketing, all of our comms, all of our collateral, that's really going to be helpful. What makes you different from the church down the street? That's going to be really key in a crowded city area like the big, like Toronto, London, you know, Sydney, Melbourne, like all big cities where there's lots of churches. What makes you different is what's going to basically be the reason why somebody comes. And so it's identifying what makes you different, and then tell people, show them in everything you do, be better in that way and the best that you can be each day and every day. Talk about it, like let that ooze and be everything. And then when that's linked to, you know, your vision and values, that's just going to make, you know, that really sets you above kind of the rest of the churches. Most churches around the world, and it's not all churches, but many of the kind of old school denominational, they've been around for hundreds of years. To me, I think they didn't have to market themselves or communicate well for hundreds of years. And so I feel like it's just, you know, assumed that they don't have to work hard. Whereas a lot of the newer movements, like, you know, charismatic stuff, evangelical stuff, Holy Spirit stuff, that's really key. That, you know, why should I come to Catch the Fire than the Baptist church that's 2 doors down from my house, or the Pentecostal church that's down the road? Especially if some of those other churches are Holy Spirit friendly, or, you know, do all of that. We need to figure out what sets us unique and makes us better. And that can be our lead, especially when we're talking about new people. You know, come to Catch the Fire Toronto because we have the best coffee within a 20-mile radius. Nothing to do with church, but the simple fact that we do coffee better than every church within 20 miles is a marketing point that I can sell. Or we have the best worship experience of any church within, you know, whatever. And as long as that is a true statement and it's not just made up, that's going to help you really simply grab people and highlight that. And it's really important, again, with all our, like, you know, our internal communications with our website, our bulletins, is that really, if our church people love coming to church and they reflect our vision and values, and they get excited about what we're excited about, and they're passionate about what we're passionate about, they're going to tell their friends about church or about an event or about, you know, the bowling weekend or the barbecue or whatever it is, not because we've asked them to tell people, just because they're so excited. And so the best that we can do to get our own core audience of people that are in our church on board, excited about it, they're going to do all of the best marketing. We could spend millions of dollars, and a comment from one of our church people to their neighbor is still going to do better than the best television commercial or, you know, movie trailer or whatever, just because people like that trust and that relationship, and that's really what's going to help us win. So before we do anything, before you have a meeting or talk about something or start thinking about spending money, these are the 3 basic fundamentals for church marketing, which we've been doing here for probably 10 plus years now, and it's really helped us to be intentional and keep all that. Knowing who you are, just like when we learn about our identity in Christ, it's important that we know who we are as an organization, because how we're going to kind of communicate and say things is going to be different depending on the type of thing that we are. So how the First Baptist Church in basically every small town in America or Canada, there's like a First and Second Baptist Church. I'm sure that's the same in England or wherever else. And they have 60 people in church, and they're all 95 years old and have been going since they were children. And those churches are going to communicate and say things differently than Hillsong Sydney would, or whatever the big church in America is, Gateway with Joel Osteen. Or that's going to be different than how, Toronto would communicate, or Raleigh, or any of that kind of stuff. So knowing who your organization is helps you find the tone. So don't try to be something that you're not. Own what you are and do good at that. So in Toronto's case, I would say that we are a regional resource church. So we're a church that people are willing to drive, half hour, 45 minutes to come to, because we've got something that they want. There are other churches that are small community churches, and those are generally like local people. So they, live in the area and they just go to that church because they live close to it. Then you've got your mega churches, Hillsong, Gateway, there's, huge churches in Korea and all those kind of things. Those guys, they're going to communicate differently. And same with like missions bases, YWAM bases, Iris bases, all those kinds of things. It's just the tone with which you come and speak from is different. So knowing who you are is really key. Knowing where you're going, your church's vision, are you happy with the size? As again, what makes you different from the church next door to you? The example I give, if you've ever been to Toronto, there are 3 churches that meet within 100 meters of, we're on a little corner, and across the road is 2 different Seventh-day Adventist churches. And so what I always kind of talk to people is, well, what makes them different than us? Obviously there's a lot of things, but we have 1,000 people on Sunday, they have probably 50. So there's reasons why, and we've been able to communicate those reasons, and we get more turnover than they would get more turnover simply because of our communication. But knowing the church's vision is where you're going, people are always waiting to kind of get on a train that they can get on a train with, that they're passionate about. They're like, yeah, this church is going to change the city, so I want to be a part of that. And then, as Joe kind of mentioned at the beginning, knowing who we're trying to attract is really key. So you want to build your church and target your communications and your marketing towards your perfect customer. So we as church people, we love everybody. We want everybody to come. But if you were to kind of take a second and pause and say, if there's 100 people in a room and we can only ask 5 people to join our church, we're probably going to target a certain type of person. And so it's figuring that out and building your core with that, and then letting that kind of grow, and as resource becomes available, adding in and all that. So some more detail there. It just, as I kind of already went over this, but it's who you are is your base point. That's where everything starts from. So before you have any talks of spending money, first make sure you know who you are, because that's going to communicate where you're going. Again, compelling reason why. Give people something to hold on to. If you're on a tour and the Jeep breaks down in the middle of the Amazon, and the tour guide is indecisive, doesn't seem to know what he's doing, and is saying, we'll go this way, then go that way, you're probably not going to want to necessarily listen to all of his advice, right? Whereas if he's like, no, everyone, we're under control, we are going to walk 2 miles that way, and we're going to get to the rescue plane, then everybody instantly is like, yes, I'm following you, right? So the tour guide gave us a compelling reason why we should put our trust in that tour guide, right? So as a church, what's our vision? What's our goal? What's that reason why I'm going to come every Sunday? I'm going to bring my kids to kids church. I'm going to, start tithing. I'm going to do all that. So it's going to be different for each and every one of us, but finding that out and that being one of our key marketing kind of messaging is really key. And then the last thing is knowing where you're going helps keep you focused. So there's always going to be people with fantastic ideas. We are never short of ideas within Catch the Fire about new missions or outreaches or conferences or weekends or music albums or whatever it is. And so you can very easily just be sporadic and unfocused and not do a good job anywhere. Whereas if you're always knowing where you're going, that helps keep the ship straight, and that means helps you from getting lost and your messaging from being sporadic. And then the biggest and most important thing is know who you're trying to attract. So is that person going to fit in perfectly? What age group are they? Are they youth, young adults? Are they parents with young kids? Are they 50 plus people? Or you can always group people with locations, people that are interested in missions. It's just finding out the type of person that is going to love you the most and kind of starting from there. Because if you can get those people locked in, then they're going to keep telling their friends, and more people like that are going to come. And the example that kind of I'll share is about maybe 5 years ago, Catch the Fire Toronto, we made a shift that all of our communications, all of how we operate Sunday mornings in terms of the lighting, the music style, the volume, the graphics, the look of our website, all of that we shifted to be young adult focused. And so everything we do is for the kind of 18 to 35-year-olds. Not that it's not for everyone else, but when we're looking at what's something going to look like, sound like, that's our target audience. And we just did our annual report, and I was looking at the demographic stats, and we have 70% of our people are under the age of 35 for our church. So we've got like 20% kids, 25% youth, and almost 30% young adults. So everybody is under 35, and then you've got kind of under 65 as 20%, and then seniors is over as 6%. So basically, we used to be a church full of seniors, and we realized that if all the seniors keep going, basically the church gets old and dies. To put it bluntly, it's not mean, but that's just, eventually you're not going to have a church. So let's shift everything. Let's target young adults, and our data, has started to fill in all that. And so that's just, we're attracting the people that we're targeting. And so we know that that's working. Types of marketing. This is a whole book that I had to read in marketing school. So don't bother reading that one. Mass marketing is called like a shotgun approach is the nickname. So it's where you're trying to get your message just to as many people as possible. So an example would be during the World Cup finals match, where there's umpteen million, hundreds of million people watching. You pay for a television ad that's going to cost you millions and millions of dollars, because you know that there's just going to be, 1.5 million people are going to be watching that, and they're going to see your ad. Or the same thing would be getting an ad in your kind of local newspaper, where there's 30, 50,000 people that read that. So you're going to put an ad in, and it's basically you're trying to get that message out, and you're hoping that your good people are going to be one of those people that are going to see it, if that makes sense. Another idea with marketing is called differentiated marketing. And this is generally what we've been doing in Toronto. It's where you have different strategies for different audiences. So you do one strategy targeting youth, and you use the methods that we'll go through later to target those people. And then we'd have a different strategy for the older people, and a different strategy for like the young adult section. And, it's a lot more work, but you are able to craft the message better to be better received by each of those different demographics of people, if that makes sense. And then the last type of market is concentrated. And so this is where you're only going after a very small amount of people. So, but those people are going to be your biggest fans. So an example of this in Toronto is there is a street or two in the richest part of the city called Rosedale. It's where all the millionaires go. And what they do is they compete with each other because they have too much money to spend and they like feeling bougie and important. They basically compete with each other to have the best kitchen or the best backyard pool or the best, garden in the front. Every year, it's just constant renovations year after year. And there is actually a magazine that is only distributed to like 50 houses. And those 50 houses, and that magazine is full of carpenters, general contractors, gardeners, all putting their ads in. And so they're only going after 50 households, but they know that those 50 people are going to spend money. So if I can get one of those people, then it's worth my ad buy to get into that magazine. So that also works in some of our social media, within church stuff. If you go around to the local community and put a flyer in everyone's mailbox, these 200 houses around us, they're going to get a flyer. That's really concentrated. So you're not necessarily trying to get lots of people, but you feel like because of the demographic of the audience, the closeness of those people are, that you're most likely to get somebody to kind of do what you'd like them to do. So we generally do combinations of all three of those, but differentiated marketing is generally what we've done. And we focus a lot of our efforts through social media and targeted ads within those audiences. So what that means is I'll do different ads on Facebook and I'll word them so that a teenager will like that, and I'll only be shown to teenagers. And then I'll do another one with maybe a different picture or the same picture but a slightly different way of saying it, and that'll go to only people between a certain age range. And that's something that I can show you guys how to do individually through Facebook ads and Google ads and all that. So hit me up later and I can kind of help you guys through that. But that's a really influential thing. When we're going to choose our strategy of what we want to do, it's really important to figure out who our perfect customer is and put ourselves in their shoes. Rather than chasing people around and trying our best to figure it out, let's just figure out, well, if I'm going after young adults, what stores, grocery stores or coffee shops are they visiting? What websites do they visit? What Facebook groups are they a part of? What Spotify genre are they playing with or listening to? And you go through the effort of finding where they're already and you put your ad there. So you're not chasing somebody, you're actually getting out in front and they stumble upon you. So that is far more effective than some of the other ways. What social networks are people a part of? Generally the answer is Facebook, but if you're going at young adults are using Facebook less and less and less, and Instagram is becoming more and more of the primary social media right now. And we were just at a Facebook conference, and basically everyone there is saying Instagram is the future, Instagram is the future. So the more that we can start harnessing Instagram, and especially we're targeting young adults, so that's right in the wheelhouse there. And another example off of that would be if you're targeting, crafty women, well then Pinterest would be a better social network for you to do. But if you're going after men, don't bother with Pinterest. And just as a fun little stat, 70% of Instagram users, wait, no, that's the wrong number. Oh, I forget it. Anyways, there is a high percentage of moms with kids under 5 on Instagram. So if you have a product or a message to get to moms with kids under 5, Instagram is 100% the way to go. And generally, moms with kids under 5 also have husbands, and husbands will generally do whatever it is to keep the kids happy. And so if you can target, families and kids' church and all that, that's another key differentiator that can help your church grow. When we're choosing our strategy, so we're choosing our demographic, trying to figure out which marketing type is best. The biggest other thing is what's our budget. Generally in churches, historically, the budget has been 0. So that makes it difficult sometimes, but always figuring out what can you spend. and then also taking into account what you can achieve. So what I can achieve in Toronto with my marketing team and graphics team is different than what somebody could achieve in I don't know, we'll pick on Alistair in London, because he's got Mary and a few other people, but they're probably not as many people that can focus because there's a lot of things going on. Or if in Greensboro, I know that they basically don't have any like on team graphics people. So, what I can achieve is different than what you guys can achieve depending on the resources. So it's always looking at that. And then another thing, just out of pure, I don't know what the word is, but we used to be very guilty of people having great ideas, and we printed lots of flyers and made lots of, boxes and boxes of posters and flyers with the intent of taking those flyers and handing them out to people. And sure enough, we got the flyers in, we paid all the money, and the boxes just sat in the cupboard and never got used. And so in theory, we paid for garbage. So if you are going to print something in mass quantities, please do me the favor and actually make sure that something happens with that thing, as opposed to it just being a lovely pile on the welcome desk at church that never goes anywhere. You'll save yourself some money and a headache, and you'll get your message out. For churches, my kind of rule has always been, how can I reach the most people by spending the least amount of money? Just because we don't have huge budgets. So it's figuring out the areas with which to do that, which I'll go into a little bit later. And then my last point here is, we're going to do it. We're going to tell people we're doing it, and we're going to get people excited. So generally, we're using social media as that hub there. And so if right now we're fundraising to give some underprivileged kids in the community some backpacks for school when they go back to school. So they get a free backpack and pencils, paper, all the things. And so we're doing it. And then our social media is telling everybody, hey, we're really excited about this. We're just we're telling people within the journey that we are doing it, and trying to get all of our church as excited as possible about just the concept that we're reaching our community, and hoping that those people will in turn either give some money or give some pencils and paper or help on the day distribute the bags or whatever that is, right? So not only are we doing something, we're creating a buzz around that whole thing, and that buzz is kind of what takes something from a little bit to like a much bigger campaign without really any money, which is also handy. Print media, we've got newspapers, magazine, you can bus stop ads, you can wrap a car or a taxi cab now, the road signs, flyers, all those types of things. These are great and basic examples of mass marketing, but they are also very expensive. And so generally, we've not chosen to do any of these just because of sheer cost. There's a magazine in North America called Charisma. It gets to 250,000 charismatic Christians within North America. A full page ad costs upwards of $10,000 for one issue. So I generally don't have an extra 10 large hanging around just to hope. So if you have the money and the project is big enough to relate to that, and the return on that marketing will allow you to kind of spend that much money, those are fantastic options. But generally print is not necessarily affordable. What is affordable, which we haven't done yet just because of our location, and I'm sure this is everywhere, you can choose to put an ad on a bus, like a city bus, and you can choose the route that the bus drives. So if you know that there's a bus that drives around your neighborhood where you are, you can actually put a little ad on the side of the bus, and then that ad is going to be driving by people in your local neighborhood all the time. So that's costs a little bit of money, but it's also a really good targeted ad there. Another big thing, and what we primarily do, is digital ads. So our web ads on our website, the Google ads engine, social media ads, mall screens, theater previews, apps. You can do all of that. All of that obviously costs money, and you need to design the graphics to support all that. If you don't already know, Google has what's called, what is it called? anyways, they will give you free money if you are a charity. They will give you 10,000 Google Ads grant. That's what it's called. So if you Google Google Grant, it takes you to a web page and you can apply, and basically they will give you $10,000 a month of free Google money to target within your Google thing. And so it's free money, and it's Google. So anytime somebody searches church in London, then, you know, obviously you're going to have some money that Google will let you do. And then, you know, Catch the Fire London will be further up on the Google page. These ads are especially useful for smaller towns. I'm sure in London and like Toronto, there's hundreds and hundreds of churches all paying for those spaces. So it's harder for us to get near the top. But if you're a smaller town and no one else is doing it, I know the Ottawa guys are doing it, and for them it's super helpful because no one else is really doing it there. So they're basically competing with nobody, and it's free money. And then social media ads are really handy as well. And I know Anita and Joe and the guys talked about that the last time. So if you didn't get that one, watch kind of the strategies on social media. I can teach people on how to do the paid ads through the Facebook engine, and also Google ads, but that's more of a one-on-one conversation than a sit here and listen, because you probably will get bored, because it is detailed, but it is worth it. So, you know, for our church, the biggest thing is going to be our direct marketing. So the weekly emails that we send to our church family, the bulletins, the church updates, all the stuff they see when they're at church, that's the best marketing we can do. Because again, if our people are excited about it, if our people understand what's going on, if, you know, they're going to tell their friends. And now we don't have to pay any money to anybody because our people are so excited about what's going on, they'll just do the work for us. So making sure that, you know, your weekly emails are, you know, excellent communication things. If it's got to look good, it's got to sound good. Another big thing with kind of weekly emails and bulletins is make sure that you're not just kind of tweaking information week to week. Make it visually different every single time. So if that means there's normally a, you know, a top picture section and then two smaller little ad sections, just rearrange them. You can keep the same information, but if the bulletin and the email looks like it hasn't changed week to week to week, people will start tuning it out because they'll look at it and say, I've already seen that. And then they won't actually read it. And now all the information that you took the time and effort to put there, no one reads. It's the same with kind of your church announcements, however you do that in your church. Make sure that it's different. So if you're talking about an event or a conference or a project, change up each time how you say it. Don't just repeat the same script or show the same promo week to week, because if someone feels like they've already got that information, they've tuned out, and they'll actually tune out not just for that one section, but for the entirety of the announcement period. So they won't even get to the rest of the bulletin or the rest of the email, and you've lost your opportunity. So it's really important to make sure that all of this direct marketing, it looks visually different, even though some of the information is repeated. Again, social media is really key. When we're looking at money and spending, we're all charities, we all have boards and people that we're accountable to. So it's really important that we can prove to people that we have spent our money wisely. So some basic calculations, especially if you're using some paid ads and web things, is this the kind of info that they're going to feed you. However much money divided by the number of people reached is your cost per thousand. And however much money you spent divided by the people that engaged with your digital ad is called engagement per thousand. What ad engines or Facebook and Google and all the people that are trying to get you to spend money with them to put your ad somewhere, what they're going to prioritize is the cost per thousand, the first one. So they'll say, well, great, we can get your message to 100,000 people or 50,000 people or 2 million people. But getting your ad seen by 2 million people, if nobody ever clicks, means nothing. So the better stat that I like is the engagement per thousand. So that tells me how many people not only saw the ad, but did something about it. So they opened up the email that I sent them, they clicked on the link and they went to my website. Or they, on social media, on Facebook, they like, clicked, comment, shared, they did something. That to me is a much better stat that's going to help you figure out if what you did was worth it. And so let's just say for easy math that we spent $100 on a Facebook ad and we had 1,000 people engage with it. So we spent $1 per person so that they could see our message, and we know they saw the message because they did something. Whereas if you do the cost per thousand, sorry if this is boring, but this is important. You could say, well, we spent $100 and it went to 30,000 people, but only like 5 of them clicked. Well, actually, it cost you $20 a click rather than $1 a click, if that makes sense. So it's all comes down to kind of, is your money worth it? Whenever you're spending money, you always want to ask whatever company that kind of is, what the view rates, share rates, click rates, open rates, engagement rates, they have all average numbers. And so they'll give you kind of the basic stats that let you know whether or not that's even worth attempting. And again, I can help you guys go through more specific things after the fact, because it is very much numbers, but it's important. And knowing your data and if you spent that money wisely is really up to you, whoever's in charge of the spend. But I always look at it and say, well, if we spent a certain amount of money, did we get that number of return? So an example was for the Revival 25 conference we did. Spotify has a fantastic ad engine with them where all the free people that they hear ads, right, to listen to music. And so you can say, anybody that listens to Christian music on Spotify that is within this geographical area, you're going to play my ad. And so we did that in for the Revival 25 conference because we had Brian and Jen Johnson to do worship. So basically my ad said, if you play any Bethel music content and you're within Canada, at some point you're going to hear my ad. So we did that. We spent like $1,000 on it. It looked good. It sounded good. And we were excited about it because it was this new thing. And then by the time we got to the concert, I looked at the data and we spent $1,000 and we got 27 clicks. And so basically that's a lot of money for those clicks. And there's no way for me necessarily to know, did all those 27 people sign up? If they did, well, their conference fee generated more times 27, generated more revenue than 1,000, but it didn't necessarily make it worthwhile. So for this next conference coming up for us, I've really dialed back the targeting and kind of all that, and I'm watching it daily as opposed to waiting until the end to know if it becomes not worth it. So that's kind of a cool little engine, but you want to make sure that it's worth it. Another example, we were working for our youth conference on a promo video. And so we had 5 or 6 people that were kind of conceptualizing, looking for it. We were going to do this really slick, smoke and, slow motion and, lights and all this kind of stuff. And there was an outside component. So we shipped everyone, we got a truck and a van, and we were working on this really, was going to be like an Emmy award winning trailer for a conference. But it got to a point where we were so behind on the timeline that that wasn't going to even get released to people until like 2 or 3 weeks before the event started. And so at that point, I'm like, well, this isn't even worth it because the people that are going to want to come because of the video aren't even going to see the video in time enough to book the conference. So we quickly had to kind of shuffle and rejig, and we put something way less epic out. And it was still great, but it's one of those where we did the math and the people's time and our spend on it was never going to generate enough return to make it worthwhile. So we scrapped it. So it's being okay with, making a decision like that. It's money, and people in our churches, they tithe and they don't want us to waste their money on what could be cool, but isn't necessarily fruitful. One year we did a video where we got a slow motion camera and we wrote ungodly beliefs on glass panels, and we took hammers and we broke the glass panels and the slow motion shards and you know, it was really cool and conceptual, and we spent like 4 months doing it, and it was awesome, and I loved that we did it. It did not bring a single person to the conference. And so when it comes down to it, it was awesome, and our creative juices got flowing, but it didn't actually impact, it didn't fulfill its purpose. And so therefore, to me, that was a fail. So that's just kind of worth being aware of. With today's world and technology, we are seeing hundreds and hundreds of messages daily. So while we're not directly competing with Apple and Mercedes and you know, food company X or Coca-Cola, we're not competing with them directly. Like, it's not like someone's gonna come to Catch the Fire Raleigh or buy a Coke. You know, that doesn't happen. But what we are competing with is for awareness space. And all these companies have hundreds of millions of dollars to spend on ads on your phone, on as you drive, and the newspaper. And so what we need to do as churches is really try to be smart with what we do. We want to be resourceful and really harness our community to kind of get the word out as best as possible, because we're not going to ever be able to compete dollar for dollar with those big brands. We're never going to be able to compete with Hillsong's marketing budget, or you know, Bethel Heaven Comes marketing budget. It's massive, and their marketing budget is probably twice what our entire conference budget would be for us here. So we're never going to be able to compete dollar for dollar, but what we can do is we can compete with harnessing the power of our community. So that's really handy there. And how we harness the power of the community is by telling stories. If somebody walks into church in a wheelchair, goes into church on a wheelchair, and they walk out, I don't have to tell anybody in church to tell their friend about that, right? Because someone's come in a wheelchair, God did something awesome, and they walked out, that person's going to tell all their friends, like, how can you walk now? And now instantly you've got 50 people that are going to know about your church. All your people in your church are going to tell their friends somebody rolled into a wheelchair and walked out. And instantly your church has spectacular marketing, not for anything you've done other than letting God do his thing. So it's really important as a church. Now, we don't have the whole wheelchair thing yet every single Sunday in all of our churches. We'll get there. But what's important is identifying every single Sunday what's one amazing thing that God did that day. Even if it was for a single person in the room, they got breakthrough, they you know, just needed a hug and got a hug, or whatever it is. Identify one message per Sunday, and then make sure that that's the story we're telling for the next week or the next 2 weeks. And do that every single week. And social media and our emails and our bulletins are great ways for us to get those stories out. And those stories is what's really gonna get people in the door. Not necessarily slow motion and fog and glass and lights and all that kind of stuff. So that's really key. And that is basically 7 minutes to spare. I would love to help you guys. I know I rambled off a lot of information and data, but I wanted to give you guys just the general basis. And then when we do have conversations, then that saves us time and we don't have to, you know, go through all of this to get the feet rolling. So that is that. And we can do questions, which I know I ignored all the text ones because my thing was being weird. Where is? No.
So, John,
Yeah.
Brian here. We're doing a lot, as you know, in Ottawa, the marketing, that sort of thing. And it seems to me that the question is really to do with websites and just how important and how much effort should be put into the websites, because it seems that a large amount of our marketing and you know, almost daily communications stuff is through Facebook and Instagram.
Yep.
And so it seems that, you know, websites are almost becoming redundant in some ways, unless you can drive people to your website.
Yeah, so the quick answer there is, and what we've tried to do is, the core, the juice of the information lives on the website. And every one of our social posts, or as many as possible. It's the exciting, get you excited about something, but excuse me, the detail is going to be on the website. So what we try to do is, for an outreach is we, really slick photo, get some kind of blurb to hopefully get people excited, and then a link where you have to click to find out more information, or click to sign up, or something like that. So while a lot of information can be communicated through social, not every single person sees every single post. So we can't rely that everyone's going to see everything. And then also, if you put all of the grit and the meat of everything you're doing in a post, it's going to be too long and too much information, and so no one's going to see it. So you kind of have to walk a line where, I know it seems like websites are becoming useless, but that's where I would say give people a reason to have to click to your website. And so change the way that the content that you're putting on, so that it's basically, it's called, there's a term called clickbait, which is terrible and we should never do it. But you'll see it on Facebook all the time where they're like, can you believe what Prince Harry said to Meghan Markle on their last outing? And there's a random photo that looks like it could be like scandalous, and then you click and then it's just some ad for like a swimming pool. That's kind of the extreme of it. That's called clickbait. It's terrible. But if we can kind of harness the concept of that in what our content is to get enough people excited that they are going to click, and then they'll go to the website where they can get the nuts and bolts of it. And that's where you can get newsletter subscribes and other things like that that are helpful.
I think also to follow on, that's great, John. Thank you very, very much, by the way. To answer your question there, Brian, I think it's what you make your website. So really a website is to inspire. It's to inspire movement. It's to inspire me to come back. So if you want me to come back, fresh stuff needs to be on there in order for me to come back. And you cannot repeat anything enough, really. Over communicate. So if you put things on social media, I would say the website backs it up. So that's like structure that actually contains all the communication, and it hosts everything, because there are some people who still use the website for information, maybe a different demographic, whereas the younger demographic might just use social media. My demographic definitely uses websites to come back to. And so I think it's a responsibility to almost be a dynamic website, so the information is kept alive. It's inspiration. It wants me to come back. You give me a reason to come back to it. I know that that's the source of where I'm going to get all the communication. I think, does that answer your question, Brian?
Yeah, that's good. We want to use all we have, all the tools we have, of course. But I like the idea you're saying about keeping it fresh.
Mm-hmm.
Some of the photos on the cover, but it's to get people to go to your website. That's the key. And we do a little bit of that through social media. Like we post every Tuesday some a little bit summary of the sermon, and let people know that the full sermon is available on the website.
Yeah.
And I think that's
so they can go website and hear the full sermon.
And sorry, just to add to that, because I'm also from the Ottawa campus, something I started doing was a family devotional that I put out every week to kind of draw people into the website. So I'm trying that out too, because I think that's important to bring people back during the week, not just on Sundays.
And that, people put their podcasts on, they put their sermons on, they put, you're adding value. And I think practically one thing that John and I love to do, in anything you communicate, put the website at the bottom. There's always a call to action. I'm calling you into, leading you into my website. That's your anchor for all your marketing. Go to, and then your website address. So there's one thing that they go to. Don't send them to a gazillion different areas. You want to centralize the action, which is really, if in doubt, do it as the website. Because actually that's your anchor for every communication. That double up the communication with really the source being the website.
And we did simply by changing that every post had to have a website link. Within a year, we saw an increase of 50% more people traffic to our website than the years past.
The confusion comes is when you start directing them to all these different communication channels. If in doubt, direct it to one source, which is the website. And that actually then you're saying that's a valuable source for you to go to every time. And then on your website, you can bring them into the different areas of all the different ministries and things.
The podcasts and all the things.
So there's a question here about marketing tips, better ways to market towards encouraging volunteering. I think honestly, that is a gold question that every church would love to have more volunteers.
Yes.
I think we've realized here in Toronto, we've had many seasons of trying to encourage volunteers. And really, it's going back to what John said, you're telling a story. You're a compelling why I would love to serve. And it's not a to-do, you're calling people into their who. So it's actually saying, we value you. You're an amazing member of this church. In fact, you belong. We love you to take ownership. We value you. We thank you. You're amazing. So you're actually a great campaign that's happened many times in different formats to actually bring volunteers into action or to encourage, inspire people. You're inspiring people to serve really at the end of the day. And so it's like, actually, how do you do that effectively? I know as an individual, what I would do is, okay, how do you reach me? That's a question I often ask myself when we're marketing and doing a campaign is, how would you reach me? Well, actually, I would love to feel valued. I would love to know that when I volunteer, they appreciate me. And actually, I know that when I volunteer, I love to come alongside someone and bring them a little further forward than they were before. So you begin to put a human aspect to it rather than a functional side to it. If you suddenly say, I want volunteers, there's a bit of baggage to that, and people are like, whereas if you say, we value you, we love you, you are so much part of this community, you're part of this church. When you're not here, we miss you. Wowzers, I want to be there. It's just a little different tone of voice that actually, that inspires me rather than informs me. If you inform me, I'm bored. If you inspire me, I'm compelled. And it causes movement. And I think that's what's the fun game about marketing, is actually saying, has that caused movement for the audience? If it doesn't cause movement, call to action, whatever you want to cause it, then it's not effective. If it's not effective, then it's just an expensive piece of communication tool that looks pretty. We call that's a very expensive, pretty video. But what on earth have you moved me into after watching that video? Yeah, I've got a little flutter in my heart, but you've not moved me into an action. You've lost me. You've spent an awful lot of money on something that's really beautiful and pretty. You'll start tuning in now, start tuning into different communications and seeing, are they calling me into some movement, into an action? And do I know where to go with that action? And if you've not answered that, then that's a very expensive communication piece that often is gone after half an hour. You've lost me. You've not connected to me. And that's the fun game. It's like, actually put yourself in their shoes. That's what I would say as an audience. That often gets me hooked. It's like, actually, what would attract me in this situation? What would speak to me? You know, as a mum, as a wife, as a Joe, what would attract me right now to join that or to do that or to be that? Actually, this would do. And that's a big clue to your audience, because you are the audience as well. One book that I'd love to recommend, and it's a really easy book to read, and you can get it audio as well, is Building a Story Brand by Donald Miller. It's a really practical way of breaking down a process of marketing, and it's great for actually just mapping it out and mapping your processes out. Because I think at the end of the day, it's intentional communication. And like John said, we're communicating whether we're intentional or not. You just have an awareness with it. And then with that awareness, you're strategic and understanding where you're going with it. And I think the more we get to know our audience, the more we understand, actually, this is where I want to take the audience. And this book actually just breaks it down a little bit in terms of you're taking them on your story, your journey, and actually you're leading them from where they are now into a place of where we'd like to go together. And that's marketing.
Yeah, and just as a tip, by investing our efforts with the team to improve the general day-to-day comms within the church, we've actually been able to reduce our overall marketing spend by quite a lot of money kind of year to year. So we've put our money into people and so that they can create a story and highlight all that, as opposed to putting tons of money into the actual ad by itself. So, you know, my general thought is if it's the same money, how can I help the church by having somebody kind of in person, or would I rather spend the money and it goes away into some corporation? You know, I'd much rather it kind of live within the church. So if you can do the story really well and communicate and highlight those, the need to spend as much money on outside ads drops down significantly.
And actually, that's the fun part. The fun part of not having a budget, actually, you just have to dig into creative ways of communicating and marketing and connecting with people. And actually, you can do it quite cheaply, because as long as you've got a team and you're all on the same page and you have an action together, wowzers, that's impactful, you know, because one person, like, I can affect that person next to me, that person can affect the person next to them. That's marketing. And so actually it's finding creative ways. You know, money is not a barrier. It really isn't. You can actually be very efficient by word of mouth, as long as all of you are on the same page and you know where all of you are going with it. That's the fun part. Any other questions? Anything that you'd like to bring up? Well, if not, feel free to email. Feel free to email me or John. And even, you know, as you process this, or if you've got a specific project you'd like to market, email and just ask for suggestions. You know, and we don't mind at all having chats with you, because you've all got different individual needs. Or as and when you design something and you're like, you know what, or you know, you suddenly begin more and more aware of marketing or communication. It's like, you know what, ask those questions. You know, get specific with your questions, and we're totally open to be answering those, because we're after, at the end of the day, we've got a common goal. We're after actually being on the same page when it comes to communicating the message of Catch the Fire. And if all of us take on some kind of action to bring that into action, then wowzers, can you imagine the effectiveness of that? That's just really powerful. So thank you. And thank you, John. That was amazing. That was really inspiring. I took away some gold nuggets as well. So thank you. And yeah, lovely to see you again.